Alright folks, so this is part 2. I know it's been a little while since I've posted. I ended up finishing the knife that I started on, so I had to forge out a second one similar to the first one so I can show you how to grind and finish this style integral chef knife. I did a lot closer forging. It's a lot cleaner, as you can see. Still about the same width, a little bit shorter, I think. The thickness is good. Thick where it needs to be, thin where it needs to be. Alright, so I'm going to go through. The first thing I'm going to do is grind profile. I started a little bit, but you'll see, clean up the profile. You can see I really don't have much to do. This is as forged, other than the little bit of cleanup I did on the spine. You can see I didn't really do much cleanup because it's not actually touching the bolster. So I'm going to clean up. And then it's really important to have our transition right here at the bolster dead flat. So what we're going to do is take a file guide, clamp it on there, grind all the way around, and then we'll use a disc grinder to flatten off all those surfaces. Alright, stay tuned. Thank you. So now that the profile is ground, it's a good looking profile. What we're going to do is we're going to go in here. You can see there's kind of a slope. We only need about that much of the bolster, and then the rest is going to go away. So what we're going to do is take our file guide. This is a Creative Man. He goes by Valhalla Ironworks or something now, but we're going to take this and loosen it up. We're just going to place it on the bolster. We're going to use the file guide as kind of our distance. This is about 3/4 of an inch thick. I think it's 5/8 or something like that. It's over a ½ inch. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this as our reference guide. I'm using the carbides as my flat reference surface right here, and really feathering in everything. I'm using as much surface contact to the guide as possible to ensure that it's staying as flat as possible. And then I go to the disc grinder and do the same thing to really clean up and give me some real nice fine scratch lines around the bolster. Here I'm using a rounded carbide burr and a flex shaft tool to undercut around my tang and to remove any 90-degree or hard angle from grinding. So I'm going in there with the round tip and really rounding everything out so that there's no stress riser or anything like that. And then that undercut allows me to have a smaller flat surface contact area that meets up with the spacer that I'm going to do later. Alright, so here I'm drilling my 1/4-inch hole. You do this before heat treat because the metal's soft right now after normalizing. Then you fill this space in with a brass slug later on, so that way you're drilling through soft material while you're fitting up your handle. Alright, so I'm tempering twice for 2 hours at 390 degrees Fahrenheit. Then this should be pretty close to 60, 61 Rockwell at the edge. Alright, so I'm taking a black Sharpie and marking the edge, and then I'm going to take a 1, 2, 3 block with a single piece of painter's tape on it, and I'm going to take my height gauge and mark a relative center line so I know where to bring my initial bevels to when I start grinding. I start by using a worn out 40 grit belt from Combat Abrasives. The reason I use a worn out belt is because that hard 90-degree corner is going to knock off all the abrasives of a brand new belt, and you're going to ruin an $8 belt. Once I get the initial bevels brought to that center line that I scribed earlier, I pop on a new belt and start working and feathering those lines back. So you create facets. Your first facets are very steep, almost a 45-degree angle, and then you start feathering those back, and I'll show here in a second how I do that. Point out the angle I'm grinding here, so it's almost a 45-degree angle from the platen instead of your typical 90. The reason I grind at that angle is because that means there's more contact area on the surface of the knife. Instead of just going 90, you have 2 inches of contact area on the knife, versus that 45 is giving you about 2.5 to 3 inches of contact area. So you're not giving yourself any big grooves, and the grind is staying flatter. So when I'm grinding, you'll notice that I was going like this. Okay, so when you create your initial bevel with the worn out belt, you're gonna create a spot that's gonna give you a shadow. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to the belt, you're gonna find that edge again, and you're gonna come off just a little. See how there's that gap? There's kind of a shadow. It's hard to see because of the camera. There, that kind of shows you. So you see that shadow? That's how you know that when you're grinding away from your edge. So the bigger that shadow, the further back you're going on your blade. You notice that, so this shadow, I'm gonna lay this facet. So there's facets. You've got your facet for your initial, and then you just keep moving it back. So there's the initial. You see there's no shadow. That's my next flat. See how there's that shadow? You follow that until it blends back in with your edge, or close to, because you don't want to remove material away from here in this coarse grit yet. This is thin, so once you move on to the next belt, you can start working back at your edge to make it thinner. Okay, YouTube, I just went over establishing your initial bevel and then grinding and feathering that back. So this is going to be the end of this video. This is part 2. There is going to be a 3 and 4. Turn on those notifications, like and subscribe. All of that helps. Make sure you click the bell so that way you can actually be notified when I'm posting these videos. So I have part 3 and 4 filmed, and I'll post them the following weeks, as well as a bonus video about vices. I'm going to go ahead and cut this video off here. I really appreciate all your guys' support. Thank you. Like and subscribe.